Alrighty, welcome to the Citizen Special Edition. As you can see, Doug is not here, so the hamster will will take over. It'll be a takeover of hamsters. The wheel is loose, not like the juice is loose, but it's still loose.
Very good. Yeah, Doug was planning to make it. He had to do. He had a little bit of a dentist appointment this morning, and he was on painkillers. Thought he was doing fine, and then he woke up from his nap and said, this isn't happening." So we'll. Tonight's subject, we said we were going to do Freemasonry, and I got some fun stuff prepared. Doug had some good stuff as well, so I promised him I'd leave a little bit of meat on the bone for him, and so we don't have to do the whole story tonight. We can do a two-week version of it if you'd like.
Alrighty.
First of all, Andrew's under the weather, everybody, today, so you're going to probably hear more of my voice and less of his. Why did you, it was your idea to do Freemasonry, so what got you started that direction?
I think it had something to do with the Founding Fathers and Freemasonry and the Illuminati.
Perfect. That's where a lot of people get that from. They wonder, you have all the Masonic symbols in Washington, D.C. and all the architecture.
Yeah, which would be Constitutional Roundtable, but Doug's not here, and I think whenever it's just me and you, it's going to be the Citizen, or maybe I'll call it the Flying Hamster or something.
Your channel, you can name it. So let's talk about what secret societies in general, what they are and what they aren't. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings. Start with the Freemasons. Right now, there's about 6 million Freemasons in the world. And I think you're going to find that upwards of 98 to 99% of them are pretty legitimate people doing pretty good work, and they're doing it for the right reasons. What happens is when you get a secret society with, if you're up to no good, when you have your own little secret society, what better place to hide but inside another secret society? And so I think that's what you've seen throughout history. When Freemasons get implicated in bad activities, that's what's going on there. What's interesting is every Freemason lodge has its own rules of initiation. They have some generalities the same, but they have their own rules. So it's very simple for a lodge, here in San Diego to have completely different morals and goals than the lodge where you live. They're still going to have there's some general Freemason rules, like, for example, the initiation. There's 3 things they always have in common when you get initiated. If you're an initiate, you've got your pant leg rolled up, and that shows you don't have a shackle, which means you're a free man. Okay.
Is it 1 leg or 2 legs?
Just one. Okay. Second thing you do is you've got your shirt open to reveal your left breast. That's to make sure you're a man. And the third part is they put it's like a noose around your neck. It's a cable tie, but it looks like a noose, and that's to symbolize your ties with your brothers. Now there are female Freemasons. There are women. Started in about 1930. Let me look that up.
So they changed the breast part.
No, that's why I brought it up. They got the same. It appears they have the exact same 3 initiation rites. So they show their left breast. In the women-only lodges, yeah.
I was gonna say, if there was mixed company, that could be definitely not a good situation.
No, the women Freemason is a women-only. That's started in 1913. It's called the Order of Women Freemasons. It used to have a different name, and they changed it. They wear white robes. There's about 5,000 women Freemasons in the world. So it's still very much a fraternal brotherhood. Let's go to a few more basics. Okay, how long have they been around? About the 1500s, more formally the 1700s.
Is that in connection with the Knights Templar?
No, I don't think so. Well, different societies. When we start talking about all these different societies, from the Illuminati to Knights Templar, Knights of Malta, you're going to get some crossover throughout history. You probably even have some people that were in both at times. For example, we've heard of a lot of the lore of Jesuits. Or Adam Weishaupt, who founded the Illuminati, was a Jesuit. So he was a member of 2 different quote-unquote secret brotherhoods. The history of these, the secret societies really go back to the ancient world. and you'd have these. Well, Matthew Arrett, who, if some of the listeners are probably something about my camera lens. Do I look fuzzy? Nothing I can do about that. I don't have the technological know-how. Do I look okay to you?
You look the same to me.
All right. So Matthew Arrett's a pretty bright historian. I agree with him a lot on ancient history. He's got a piece out here we're going to play a clip from tonight. But he's done a lot of work on this, the history of secret societies. And he and I agree. I agree with him on a lot of ancient history. In fact, the piece he did this piece with his wife, Cynthia Chung. He was just the narrator. I think she did most of the work on it. But we'll post that in the notes. It does a deeper dig on some of the stuff that I'll do tonight. But he talks about the old oracle at Delphi and the other mystical oracles of the ancient days, where these people had a racket. They had their spies all across all the different countries, and all the different oracles sort of worked together. And they were basically, kings would go to them and pay gold for advice, and the people believed they had to visit the oracle. And through that, they were able to topple kingdoms. It's very similar to the way our intelligence agencies work today. And I bring that up because there's a connection. Let's go back to Freemasons. Lot of famous Freemasons. Ones we'd know about. You got one who just passed away, Prince Philip. He joined at age 31.
Prince Philip just passed away?
I believe so.
Which one again?
I think so. He's the one who just passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
Family, is he one of the young ones or is he one of the old guys?
Oh, I think he was very old. I think he was like 100, close to it.
Oh, okay.
He was like 98 years old, but I don't keep up with the royals that well, so if I've got that wrong, my apologies.
Well, I'm not part of the monarchy, so that's why I don't. So, but on a side note, that's a really fascinating thing. People in America are so fascinated with the royals, but it's like, you're not under the monarchy anymore, right? Like, you don't need to be sad when the queen dies or whatever. Like,
How much of that is the fact that the media just basically kisses their butts and makes a big deal about it? Most people get sad or excited by what the media tells them to.
Yeah.
So
anyway, back on track. Sorry,
Well, it's talking about the royals. Okay, so here's some other Freemasons that were royals. You had King Edward II, King Edward VIII, King George II, King George VI. We had George Washington, Clark Gable, Andrew Jackson, Teddy Roosevelt, Harry Houdini, Mozart, Mark Twain, Nat King Cole, Oliver Hardy. So you got people from every walk of life.
Bing Crosby, I believe, was 2.
Yeah, that was not supposed to be a comprehensive list. It was just sort of to display that. Yeah, but
he was the 33rd. So.
Well, the 30th, it's interesting. It looks like there's you got 3 left.
Second and the 30th is actually the Illuminati, but
that's where that's exactly what I was going to say. So they originally had 29 levels, and then and we'll get to the Illuminati tonight. So where that comes in, I'll get to that part of the story.
Man, I'm just ruining stuff. Like I'm spoiling. It's like I'm telling the kids about the gifts before Santa comes.
Well, at least they still believe in Santa, so you don't spoil everything.
Well, I actually don't know if they do. They love Home Alone though, so whenever they think of Christmas, they think of Home Alone. So.
Okay, so your basic Freemasonry, you got 3 different levels. You got the apprentice, the journeyman, and the master, and that got you up to is either 27 or 29 levels. In 1776, I believe it was, a guy by the name of Adam Weishaupt founded the Illuminati, and they were not very nice guys. They were plotting to basically destroy Christianity and take over the world in many different ways. They got caught out. Let's see if I got the date. Yeah, it was 1776. They called themselves the Enlightened Ones. There's an Italian revolutionary leader named Giuseppe Mazzini. He was a 33rd degree Mason later on. He was working with he was heading the worldwide Illuminati operations. They were trying to overthrow Europe's monarchies. As their secrets got revealed, they were persecuted and eventually disbanded, only to reestablish themselves in the depths of other organizations, one of which was Freemasonry. So that's where you got the infiltration of the Illuminati into Masonry. That gets more interesting. We'll get to the next step of that story in a second. I want to finish up some of the more basic facts, though, before I jump into the history. Okay, it is not a religion. There's no religion or politics allowed in their meetings. The church has been, but the Catholic Church has been opposed to Masonry since 1738, and Catholics are forbidden to join. What's interesting about that is Masonry has a few fundamental beliefs. You have to believe in a higher being. That is, if you're an atheist, you cannot be a Freemason. Now, who that higher being is, they're not very set on, but a higher being, and it's because one of the things you have to do is what they're really pushing on is you're trying to improve yourself and the world around you through Masonry. That's what their idea was, and I guess we probably left out the fact that the Freemasons were originally stonemasons, and that's where a lot of the symbolism comes from. The handshakes to prevent betrayal, the passwords, the square and compass, which is their most basic symbol, the three pillars. I think the all-seeing eye is actually Illuminati, but that's what's that?
I always thought it was too. It's kind of contradictory, though, that they don't allow religion in their meetings, but yet you have to be, I guess, in their words, religious.
Yeah, believe in a higher being.
Yeah,
and we'll get into that because we'll talk about that when we get into the 18th century, the 19th century. That's when it really starts to show up, the satanic part of it. Questions so far? Oh, here's one we'll always get. See if I got this right. Some of the lodges now allow gay men to join, and there was a lot of pressure on that. And that was a big international Freemasonry fight a few years back, but that has now been settled. It's up to the individual lodge. Another fun one about Freemasonry. It's an interesting list of what countries ban them. And I'm going to go through the list, and you're going to start hearing names of countries that we generally don't think about as free and fair and open. Okay?
Oh, okay. Go ahead. I think I know where you're going. Go ahead.
Right. What's your guess?
I don't want to ruin it.
All right. Well, the first country to ever ban Freemasonry was the USSR, Soviet Russia.
Oh, okay, that makes sense, but that's not the one I was thinking.
Next one was the Nazi Germany. Mussolini banned Freemasonry. And then under dictatorship in 1864, Egypt did it. Same thing with Syria in 1960. That's 1964. And then 1965 was Syria. And now most Arab countries, with the exception of, I believe, Lebanon and one other.
Okay, I'll reveal my what I was going to say. I was going to say the Middle East. So.
And I'm not sure why I didn't get to the reason of that. Maybe I'll have that ready for you next week. Okay. Because it's fascinating because, Allah would be a higher being in their eyes. And
well, maybe they banned it because of the nefariousness of the Freemasons. Although I've heard some very sketchy things with the Middle East, and not just talking about normal stuff, like practices that they deem normal to be, you'd be in prison for life or something here. Like,
oh, sure, they throw, some countries they throw homosexuals off the buildings, and
yeah, not just that, but a bunch of other stuff, and it's insane.
You jail women for showing your face in public. Yeah, they've got beliefs that wouldn't fly too well here.
Yeah.
Let's check the chat real quick. Anything interesting? Gay Freemasons. That's kind of funny. It cracks me up.
Which I did want to clarify something. I in my head it made it sound like my kids believe in Home Alone as like the reason for the Christmas season. In my house, we're Christians, so we believe that Christmas is about Christ, not about Santa, not about Home Alone. I was just saying like that Home Alone is mostly watched around Christmas time, so that's why they think of those two together. But anyway, anyone to think like anything.
No, I made perfect sense. Going around the internet, I guess just about every year they take polls of what's the best Christmas movie of all time. And Home Alone wins more often than not.
It's my favorite. I bet you'll never guess.
What's that?
Take a guess. I want to see if you guess.
Oh God, what's the one with Bruce Willis?
Nope, not that one.
Nakatomi Towers. I always forget the name of the movie.
Die,
Go. Yeah, Die Hard. That's it.
yeah. Nope. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Funny. My parents really loved that one, and it turned out that my niece and nephew had never seen it. Talk about the difference of two generations, but so they had a National Lampoon Christmas Vacation party, and the kids liked it so much that they came over another night for more vacation series. They watched the entire. What are there, 3 of them?
I think that all right. So there's National Lampoon's European Vacation, Christmas Vacation, Vegas Vacation,
And then the original Wally World.
yeah, that one. So 4 maybe. I don't know. There's like 5 Home Alones.
Brian, I don't have an answer to why they would have an issue with gays. I thought that was an interesting bit of trivia, so I threw it out there. I did not do any deep digging into anything like that.
For my side, as far, I mean, well, I guess I'm not really gonna get into that, but no, hold on. Let me read what Brian said. Why would they have issues with gays?
Yeah.
Not following the Bible? Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say biblically, homosexuality is wrong and abomination. So you'd think that if, yeah, what he said makes sense. That's a contradiction.
Yeah, you see many world religions have opened themselves up to homosexuality in the last few decades. So, different interpretations of the Bible. Let's not start a holy war on this one tonight. Fair enough.
Yeah. We'll pacify that one for another time, or y'all could tune in to. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. The Biblical Record, which is my other show that I do randomly. There's no schedule to it because I do it based off of the guests that I could have. And I think whenever I get more time, I'll start doing them where it's just me, but I answer a lot of those questions. Whenever I have a guest on and they have a point of view or alternative theory on something, I do challenge it because everything I go off of is off the Bible. So if the Bible doesn't talk about it, then we kind of go into the speculation, but that's where it has to stay. So everything goes back to the Bible. But anyway, shameless plug. I already have episode 1 up, so people can watch that.
Brian, I'm going to get to that in a second. He's talking about how they worship the angel of light. Not across the board. They basically have to believe in a higher being. In the 1800s, a new version of a new addition to Freemasonry came called Scottish Rite. And Scottish Rite, nothing inherently wrong with it, but that's where some of the abominations of modern day appear to have come from. One of the first Scottish Rite Freemasons, I've told you about this guy Mazzini, came over here. He was an Illuminati. One of the first people he brings into power is a gentleman who's probably the most famous of the Freemasons, a guy by the name of Albert Pike. I brought up a picture of Albert Pike. Let me see if I can pull that up.
Yeah, because it has the word gays in it. They're asking why they can't see his comment. It's probably the word gays and Bible and religion. And I mean, you'd think if it says gays, they'd be okay with it, but they probably, because it sounds like it's giving a negative connotation towards gays, that they probably blocked it or something.
Either that, it's just YouTube's comments are always a little bit funky.
That too, yeah.
All right, this gentleman here is Albert Pike, and he's just an interesting enough character. I thought it was worth looking at him. Well, Albert Pike was a Civil War Southern general, Confederate general, or not general, colonel, or something along those lines.
Wait a minute, hold on a second. Albert Pike, was he the one that came up with the golden circle?
I didn't see that, but I haven't read his entire 800-page book.
Because the golden circle or whatever they were, I think weren't they tied to the Freemasons or something? Supposedly they're the ones that came up. Like it was also in the second National Treasure. The golden circle was the predecessor to the KKK.
Oh, that's we do get to. Okay. I know where you're going. I've got that here in the notes. So give me a second.
Yep.
Okay. So Scottish Rite comes in existence in 1801. At the time, a lot of these Freemason lodges were still very humanists, which is a good thing. They want for the better of humanity. Scottish Rites brought a little bit of different element to it in some of them, and that's where we start getting to this stuff.
Hold Hold on a second. Hey, Brian, we're not blocking you. I don't know. I think it's YouTube blocking you if they are. I can see your comments, but
Yeah, I can see you just fine. So Pike and a guy by the name of Colonel Saunders start running a Masonic lodge in the South. He was eventually would found the KKK, which I have here as the Knights of the Golden Circle was the name of there.
So was I right?
Yeah, you were correct on that.
I thought so, but supposedly they were the ones that were behind the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, thus also represented in the movie.
So Pike is a really interesting figure. He writes this book called 800-page book called the Morals of, gosh darn it, Morals and Dogma, and it's satanic as all hell. I'm going to let it speak for itself. I'm going to play a quick video of.
You're not going to get this episode blocked, are you?
Nah.
Okay.
I'm sharing the wrong.
Well, that guy tied to anything that has morals in it, I'm sure is the opposite. It's like the Ministry of Truth, how it's about lies.
Well, the interesting thing about Pike is there's a couple different versions of who and what he was. Some people are going to say, there's no hard evidence of all this stuff besides his own writings. This 800-page book speaks for itself, but some of the other legends about him, what he did, people, it is disputed, some of the stuff. I will tell you, his body is interned in Washington, D.C., on the same at the same building where the FBI has its headquarters.
Interesting.
So that's a little foreshadowing of where we're going to go here in a second.
Oh boy, let's do it.
I think I gotta find. Hang on. Here it is. So this is a new documentary put out by Matthew Ehret. I want to give him a shout out. He's a really good source on a lot of this stuff. And
who?
Matthew Ehret. I mentioned him earlier.
Oh, okay. What's up, community prepper? I want to get you on the show sometime.
All right. Hopefully you should tell me if you can hear this. I have it queued up to the part I want.
9. Albert Pike, general of the Confederate armies during the Civil War.
Are you able to hear that?
Yep.
Okay. This is about to be, I think it's about a 5-minute sketch, but it's worth hearing about it.
Was elected sovereign grand commander of the Scottish Rites Southern jurisdiction. In 1871, Morals and Dogma of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the Anti-Bible of the Rite, was first published by Pike. If one is to understand what constitutes the morals and dogma of such a membership, to which Hoover entered the innermost circle, it will become clear that not only does the Rite act as an opposing church to Christianity, but that pledging one's allegiance to the secret society is understood as coming before all else in the material world, including government and country. Writing about top-down organization, Pike wrote the following in his book, Morals and Dogma. The blue or lower degrees are but for the outer court of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them. Their true explication is reserved for the adepts, the princes of Masonry. These are the very same techniques used by the cult of Delphi, with the understanding that the true explication of the symbols will only be understood by those supposedly worthy of them, that is, the adepts, who are the princes of Masonry. How does one know if one is a prince of Masonry? Those who are foolish enough to have complete faith in the magic of the occult will give an honest attempt to understand such symbols. However, the truth of the matter is that those who are moved closer to the inner sanctum are merely chosen for their usefulness as instruments of a higher will. While this person might be a pawn who plays the determining role in a checkmate, they remain nevertheless just a pawn within a great game they never controlled or even understood. Pike would also write in his Morals and Dogma, "Men are but the automata of Providence, and Providence uses the demagogue, the fanatic, and the knave as its tools and instruments to effect that which they do not dream, and which they imagine themselves commissioned to prevent." Here it becomes clear that the majority of mankind is considered by the right as an instrument of Providence, and that to do the will of such Providence justifies that the right treat mankind as such. We will see shortly what sort of Providence they are speaking of. Perhaps most alarming are Pike's views of God and what is to be considered good. The Masonic religion should be, by all of us initiates of the higher degrees, maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. If Lucifer were not God, would Adonai, the God of the Christians, whose deeds prove his cruelty, perfidy, and hatred of man, barbarism and repulsion to science, would Adonai and his priests calumniate him? Yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately, Adonai is also God. For the eternal law is that there is no light without shade, no beauty without ugliness, no white without black. For the absolute can only exist as two gods. The true and pure philosophical religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai. But Lucifer, the god of light and god of good, is struggling for humanity against Adonai, the god of darkness and evil.
Kind of blood chilling, isn't it? Oops, I can't hear you, buddy.
Yeah, that man is disgusting, a blasphemer, and I'll tell you this: he's
Well, that's basically Satanism. True Satanism, as it exists, from my readings, is not necessarily fire and brimstone and evil. It's a different interpretation of natural law versus God's law. And since they don't believe in God's law, those conjectures make perfect sense to them.
That was absolutely disgusting.
I knew you'd enjoy that.
Oh man, that guy. Oof.
So these are people who want to shape the world to their own ends, and as we've talked about over the last few months, there's all kinds of different players in this gigantic global Game of Thrones. But these people wanted to work from behind the scenes and infiltrate governments and move, basically, they've got these infiltrations, or what Matt would call fifth column, places in every country in the world. What you end up seeing happening is, they will find a way to get their own people, their own brothers, into these little chokehold positions throughout the government. So even if 80% of the people in our government are straight shooters, the people that are not, I got a mosquito flying around, they will get in the choke point positions, and that's how they control government. But in our case, we want to talk about the FBI, because that is basically a secret society in itself. That is a Scottish Rite Freemasonic.
Let me say this real quick. Are they? Is the Illuminati behind the reason why we have fiat money? Because why else would they have? Why else would we have the pyramid with the all-seeing eye on it?
No, the idea of fiat currency goes back well before the Illuminati. Fiat just means paper not backed by anything else.
Okay.
The symbolism on our currency is it's probably a conversation for next week, because there's all kinds of Masonic symbolism. In DC itself, you see that stuff. Just like we talk about the symbolism, and symbolism is huge for these people. I think it's what it says in the Bible: you shall not worship idols. They don't agree with that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like literally everything the opposite of what it makes sense. It's literally the opposite of what God is, but they're saying that their side is good and right when it's really wrong. People that believe that stuff,
So let's go back to a guy by the name of Giuseppe Mazzini. He's a guy who worked with Albert Pike. He started something called the Young Europe movements. This is not too dissimilar to the Free Societies Foundation that George Soros has out there. They also had a Young American. They had a young movement for several different regions. It was all about infiltrating, destroying the monarchies, etc., destroying governments, and basically creating their. Eventually, this is all leading toward their one world order under Satan. You know, that's where it all ties into. These are the eugenicists, everything like that. These are just different versions of that giant movement.
I think you're talking about the FBI.
Yeah, we're about to get there.
I know I've been throwing everything kind of off, but my brain's actually working right now, which I'm shocked.
No, I'm not going.
5 minutes ago, my brain was. I could even rub 2 sticks together to make my brain spark.
No, I didn't set this up to go in chronological order, so it's fine.
Okay. Hey, we got 12 people in the watching right now.
That's a good number.
I think that's the highest we've been so far.
And they're live, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Is we get about 10 times more. Well, last week we got was it 2 weeks ago? We got a couple hundred views, so starting to grow the channel.
Yeah, I think people don't like all 3 of us in the same video.
That's not true. Doug's always a big pull.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying like if it's me and you, it's great. If it's you and him, it's great. If it's me and him, it's okay. But if it's all 3 of us, that's about the worst.
So we get to the 20th century, around the 1900s. A guy named Charles Bonaparte comes over, Napoleon's cousin. He was involved in some of this stuff. If you've heard me talk before about the Anglo-American, global empire or rules-based orders post-World War II, the way the British have always been able to control so much of the world is they use intelligence, what we would call espionage. And that's really what these people do with this fifth column type stuff. They infiltrate, they bribe, they find people in other countries that are willing to do anything for power. They put those people in the positions of power. They use money, bribery, every art of espionage you can think of, murder, you have it. And they do that so they can topple governments they don't like, exploit resources and everything like that. We get to the 20th century, and a gentleman by the name of Palmer is put into basically, is he the Attorney General? I don't know. He's in a pretty high position. He created it's the predecessor to the FBI. I guess what's going on is the Secret Service was being used by other government agencies for investigative purposes, and they put an end to that under Teddy Roosevelt. And that created the need for a new investigative unit, which became the FBI. Hoover gets named the first head of the FBI. In 1990, these are basically civilian vigilante spies, informers, provocateurs. They were set loose on unions, radicals, civil rights advocates. The American people absolutely could not stand it. They were very upset about this. And the Palmer raids were really the beginning of the security state. Basically, enough people were willing to sacrifice freedom for security that the Palmer raids, became a forgotten thing, and the FBI came into fruition or came into existence. From day one, the FBI, was founded by the Scottish Rites Freemasons. Hoover was very easy to compromise. He was a cross-dresser. He had a massive ego, God complex, and made him very easy to handle. He had something called a fidelity chapter, which is basically the militant arm of the FBI that was probably dealing with the descendants of today. That was basically descendants of the KKK. Another fun part of this story was under FDR, a guy by the name of Thomas Walsh was getting ready to fire Hoover. Sort of like JFK came in, he said he was going to blow the CIA to smithereens. And sort of like Trump said he was going to take down the intelligence agencies. Well, Palmer came in and he was going to blow out the FBI. The FBI was doing all kinds of they were always trying to destroy good nationalist or good American values because they wanted to topple the country for their own internationalist purposes. That's always been the goal. The FBI wasn't they'd investigate some crimes. There's always some straight shooters, but the inner circle, the Scottish Rites, now they always had a different agenda. Well, Thomas Walsh, he was going to fire Hoover, and somehow he died the day before taking office. So that shows you the length these people will go to. See what else we have here. You have questions? That's a lot of information.
I don't really. I'm not surprised that if I heard this correctly, that there's a connection between the KKK and the FBI. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, that's Albert Pike.
Yeah.
Again, if you got, I forget the name of the building in D.C., but it's right there in the FBI headquarters.
Yeah.
The two most famous of these Scottish Rite Freemasons, I would call them Illuminati. I think that's the natural connection there. They got the internment or whatever, the monument to Pike, and then you've got Hoover's desk. Hoover's quite the character. One of the books I'm reading by Whitney Webb, I've described, talks about it's going in all the Epstein chronicles. Hoover was seen at a number of parties of people belonging to the mafia, elements of the government, you name it, and these were basically homosexual orgies. And Hoover was always in a dress. There's been several people have testified to this. Ex-wives of mafia leaders, etc. Ties into the whole underworld, CIA, global narcotics trafficking, which I've talked about this here on the show before. But that's Hoover for you. And to understand the kind of power he had by getting blackmail on other people, Hoover's reign of terror lasted through 8 presidential administrations. They couldn't get rid of him. He had dirt on everybody, and everybody had dirt on him. And that's the way the game is played in DC, and I don't think it's changed.
Yeah, I think Madison or is that the representative's name? Madison
Cawthorn.
Yes, I almost said Hawthorne. On the Warrior Poet Society, on one of the episodes, I think he talked with John Lovell, and actually talked about how he was invited by fellow politicians to an orgy or something like that.
Yeah, there's documentation of this stuff.
Yeah,
these aren't conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
There's another fun little story about Albert Pike. This one is not 100% confirmed, and there's people out there. You can go to the internet and find people who dispute this. But the story is that in 1871, Albert Pike sent an extraordinary letter to the Giuseppe Mazzini. And in this letter, which apparently was briefly displayed at the British Museum before it somehow disappeared in the 70s, he predicted a series of events that would take place decades after his own death. So a modern Nostradamus for you. But according to the story, I'll just read the paragraph for you. With eerie accuracy, Pike predicted the czars of Russia would fall during a first great conflict. That would be World War I. That happened. And this Pike wrote this in 1871, so basically 46 years earlier. He then predicted that Nazism would be destroyed while communism would rise during a second great conflict. That would be World War II. Now, before you think he's a prophet, we could probably have a pretty good discussion on whether the Nazis actually lost World War II. Because I would say the American fascists who put Hitler in power, they basically won, ended up in a position of power, and ended up creating the CIA.
Yeah.
And a lot of the top Nazis got airlifted to the United States. The scientists and a lot of the leaders went to Argentina. So who actually lost? So did the fascists lose World War II? Perhaps not.
Yeah, I mean, a majority of them end up coming to America on a free ride, so it's more like they just got a transfer. But what was I gonna say? As far as Pike coming up with all that stuff, I'm sure some people will be like, "Whoa, well, I'll tell you what, I would not be surprised if he was just talking about plans openly. I mean, you could plan things 30, 40 years in advance and execute them.
That's entirely possible. That was one of the thoughts I had when I was reading that the first time. Yeah. So he's got a third prediction. He says that the Zionists will battle the Islamic leaders in a third and final great conflict during which they would mutually destroy each other. After this apocalyptic last battle, the survivors would receive the true light through the universal manifestations of the pure doctrine of Lucifer. And he was definitely an occultist. Broad term, but you understand what that means. They were into all kinds of satanic rites and rituals, just like we see. What is it? Bohemian Grove, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny how,
yeah. Go ahead. What were you saying? Funny how what?
Just amazing all these people in positions of power have got such sick and twisted minds and practices. Yeah, I don't know if it's cause or effect. Which came? Is it chicken egg? Is their belief in these satanic rituals what allows them to get to these positions of power, or is it they have a personality type gets them to power and then they get indoctrinated into these other?
Well, they got it from their father. All right, so I'm about to get a little biblical on everybody, but
tonight's the night to do it. I mean, we were talking about Lucifer, so I knew you were going to get your hackles up.
So I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Satan, at the time, Lucifer was his angel name. Satan is what he was called afterwards. The devil, Satan. Lucifer became prideful and thought he was equal, if not greater than God. Michael, the archangel, and the other angels battled Satan and the demons and kicked them out of heaven. But Satan's ultimate sin was pride. And children are like their father, right? And that's how you could tell if someone's a Christian or not a Christian, is what are their fruits? Are they loving, kind, patient, have self-control, like how the Bible says that we are to be as Christians for those who are Christians? Or are you prideful, you don't care about anyone else, you're manipulative, have an evil intent on things? Then you're like what we would call our first father. So the way how my pastor put it one time is that we have four fathers. We have our first father, who's Satan. We have our, because we're sinful, we're born into sin. And we have our forefathers, who are the fathers before us. We have our actual father, and then we have our heavenly father. So, but anyway, that's basically what I was going to get to on that tonight. But
no, that's cool. Stephanie asked, do I think Freemasonry was corrupt from the beginning, or did it just evolve into nefarious activity? I'm guessing you didn't get here from the beginning, but I'll readdress. No, I think Freemason, I think of the 6 million current Freemasons, I think the vast majority, probably close to 99% are pretty good people that got into Freemasonry for the right reasons, to better themselves and to better their communities. I think that's what the core of, these fraternal brotherhoods are. Yeah, I was in a fraternity in college, Phi Delta Theta. No, it's okay, Stephanie. I was going to recap that because, we talk about all the evils that are associated with Freemasonry. And I think what you just have is we have a perverted subsection of it. And the way it is so subdivided into individual chapters that have so much autonomy and how they run their chapters, I think it's very easy. And again, when the Illuminati were destroyed in Europe, they had to they fled to other secret societies. And, what better place to hide a secret society than within another secret society? So I think that's, people, we've all met people, have an uncle, what have you, who's a Freemason, I'm a third degree, whatever. And they're normal.
Also the, what's the guys with the fezzes? The Shriners, those guys are also Freemasons. The Shriners.
Is that a branch of Freemasonry? I didn't know if it was or not.
Yeah. I went to Wikipedia and saw this, but supposedly it's that I would trust, because Wikipedia does have sources. I didn't look at the sources, but it did mention that in there, that it's a branch of Freemasonry.
Yeah, I think overall it's a benign organization. The only issue I have is, is secret societies. That allows for the possibility of it to be perverted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
What was it?
I'm not keen of children's hospitals being ran by Freemasons.
There was a say that again.
I'm not really keen of Freemasons running children's hospitals.
Well, I think that's perfectly normal. They do have altruistic goals, and when
Yeah, but if they're satanic and perverted.
but not all of them are. The
Yeah.
vast majority are actually good organizations. Masonry by itself, it's just Freemasonry by itself. There's nothing sinister about it. It's just how it's been perverted from within in certain areas. Unfortunately, it appears that's happening in Washington D.C. and other positions of power throughout the world.
Yeah. Well, someone a while back put a connection between like all the Epstein stuff and like any like children's hospitals, the drag queen stuff, like all that. Like the Super Bowl is one of the biggest human/child trafficking event of the year. So the Department of Children's Safety or whatever that is really is nefarious. Granted, I don't have documentation of this, but that's the rumor mill.
Well, we talked earlier about my favorite secret society is the Order of Skull and Bones. You remember a couple months ago?
That one's mostly presidential, though, isn't it?
Oh goodness, no. Do you want me to track down that? If you can entertain people for a minute, I'll track down my list of prominent members of Skull and Bones. But it's oh god, you got everyone from Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush. You've got the founder of Time Magazine. Oh goodness, it's a wonderful list. It's funny. One of the co-founders of that again is a narcotics smuggler. Yeah, same way. Same way. Same way Rockefeller's dad was father was a opium dealer selling elixir. There's a lot of this ties into narcotics. It always has. I mean, probably pretty much since the British East India Company figured out how to use the opium wars to take over countries, etc. That's been the game plan for 300 or 400 years.
What do you mean, Stephanie, that's not your comment?
She said this was a comment in my group chat earlier.
Oh.
Rosu, Ugh, today. I'm not understanding that one.
The Freemasons are very bad. Many don't know that their buildings put curses on those who enter. This would include.
See, I am not seeing that comment.
Well, I just read it to you, so.
Right. That's weird.
I guess what's your take on that comment?
I'm going to disagree. Again, there's a lot of good in the world done by Freemasons, and if you look at their core fundamental philosophies, they're pretty reasonable and admirable in some cases. You get good, top people in their community. They recruit, say this is a good person. We'd like to have him join us. The fact that it gets perverted from within in some rare instances, that's not you can't cast that blame on the rest of them because they are so subdivided. It's not a very well organized, and even Albert Pike, when he was at his prime, he set up 23 subordinate councils in strategic places throughout the world, including 5 grand central directories in D.C., South America, Naples, Calcutta, and Mauritius, which were used to gather information. I mean, this is just they were basically a giant intel agency, and intelligence is more than just gathering intelligence. It's about manipulating the countries. Yeah. There was people that were pulling their puppet strings. We talk about who sits at the table, who really are the puppet masters. Yeah. They're taking these FBI, Scottish Rite, Freemasons. They're taking orders from somebody else. There's a lot of people that sit at that control table, and they're always jockeying for position. But that's kind of how the way it works. The vast majority of Freemasons don't know anything about that, just like the vast majority of people don't know. You talk about they have the different levels of Masonry up to the 33rd level, which apparently the Illuminati brought in. They're not telling the lower orders what's going on. So I would say they are not very bad. Bill, you are correct. Freemasonry is considered the oldest, one widely known fraternal organization. I did not know it was the largest. 6 million doesn't seem that big.
Well, I guess that the organization has, obviously rules that that's prejudiced towards who joins. I mean, that would actually kind of make sense. So,
All right, I'm pulling up my list of Skull and Bones. I put together this list for a presentation I gave a little while back. Oh, Skull and Bones. You had the Dulles brothers, I think. All right. So this is fun. I may have done this on your show before, but for this audience, I'll do it again. Skull and Bones. This is the worst of the secret societies that we know about, I think. Set up by Alonzo Taft in 1832. The co-founder. He's a co-founder. He built the links that ties all the people together.
is he the president?
No. He's the father or grandfather of William Taft, who will get there. So, see, they were 46 years apart in Skull and Bones, so I bet he's grandfather.
Yeah. Oh, Brady, by the way, you have 9 minutes left.
Are we cutting off at 1 hour exactly?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I can get through this in 9 minutes.
Perfect.
So Alonzo Taft was also Ulysses Grant's Secretary of War and Attorney General. So very prominent man. The other co-founder, and this is Yale University, and they pick, I believe it's 16 people, juniors, every year to be Skull and Bones the next year, and they enter into positions of power throughout the government. This is the best of Yale's people. It is an old boy network like no other. William Russell is the co-founder. His family made its money in the opium trade, and the Russell Trust still manages all of the Skull and Bones assets to this day. I would imagine that's a really large chunk of change. There's a guy named Morrison Waite. In 1837, he became a Supreme Court justice. You had William H. Taft. He's the only person to ever serve as a president of the United States and on the Supreme Court. Also, the man Teddy Roosevelt pushed aside to usher in Woodrow Wilson, which I say shows the different factions even back then. There's Harold Stanley, 1908. You know who he is?
What was the name?
Harold Stanley.
I'm guessing it's the famous Stanleys.
Co-founder of Morgan Stanley Investment Bank.
Interesting. I was thinking Stanley the carpet cleaner, but
you ever heard of no? I don't think there's a relation there, but you never know. The investment bank might have had a cousin, probably financed his business. Who knows? Ever heard of William Averill Harriman?
Mm-mm.
Bonesman, 1913. He's the son of railroad tycoon Robert Barron, E.H. Harriman, and one of the founders of Brown Brothers Harriman. He was also a participant in the business plot in 1933, where they tried to overthrow FDR. As was this next guy. Ever heard of Prescott?
Overthrowing FDR be a good thing, though? That guy was a jerk.
We don't do coups in America.
Well, I know. I'm just saying, like...
Look, FDR expanded the government as much as anybody since Lincoln, and so I do not like him, and I never will. Was he all bad? He inherited the Great Depression, which was basically created by a terrible system. He cleaned out that system. He gave us actually good securities laws. He wasn't all bad. He makes my bottom 10 presidents of all time, but he doesn't make my bottom 5. Fair enough?
Okay. I'll roll it.
All right, next name I have on here. This one you'll know, Prescott Bush.
Yeah.
He was the co-founder of Brown Brothers Harriman, along with William Averill Harriman. That is an exclusive Wall Street bank that really only catered to about the 50 richest families in the Northeast, the Yankees. This is the firm that financed the Nazis throughout the 1930s. That was Harriman and Bush. Good guys. Robert Lovett, who's known in a lot of these circles. He was friends with Prescott, and he was on Truman's War Advisory Board. Robert Lovett would be very instrumental in the founding of the CIA. Henry Luce, 1919. Know who that is?
Say the name again?
Henry Luce. Luce.
No.
He founded the world's most influential magazine empire, Time, Life, Fortune, and Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, I would never have guessed that.
Yeah, well, he interesting guy. Adolf Hitler appeared on the cover of Time magazine several times, so we can tell you where. Yeah, he made Adolf Hitler Man of the Year. I think Mussolini made it too, and one of the Stalin or someone like that may have made it. So that's where Henry Luce comes from. But
Yeah.
that controlled a lot of the media. All right, here's some more fun ones. George Herbert Walker Jr. Heard of him?
I believe I have.
His father-in-law and his father both served as Secretary of State, if I have that right. He was a big financier, and he also was the founder of the New York Mets, so he's a big New York power player.
Wait, say that name again?
George Herbert Walker Jr. That's who George Herbert Walker Bush.
Bushes. So
this is who George Herbert Walker Bush was named after.
Oh, okay.
That's how close these families are.
Gotcha.
All right, this is a big one. You ever heard of James Jesus Angleton? You should know this one.
Who?
James Jesus Angleton.
Did you say Jesus in the middle?
That's his middle name. James Jesus Angleton. Yeah, he was he's a bonesman, 1936. He was a CIA counterintelligence chief, and he was appointed to the Warren Commission that investigated the JFK assassination. So you got a secret society, Skull and Bonesman, who worked for the CIA, which more than likely played a part in the assassination of JFK. And this guy sits on the committee that's investigating him. Interesting, huh?
Mm-hmm. They make the mess and then they have their own clean it up.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we talk about these. We got these Republican committees in the Republican House coming up. You know, who sits on these committees is going to matter. Yeah, we need to hold their feet to the fire. No fake investigations.
Who's your most shocking person on that list?
God, none of them. I would say Luce, Henry Luce, the Time magazine one. That's one I didn't know. When I first found that out, I go, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'll skip to some other good ones. Potter Stewart, who ended up being a Supreme Court justice. Well, this one's, yeah, you're gonna love this one.
All right.
You remember McGeorge Bundy?
McGeorge Bundy?
He was in the news a lot in the 60s and 70s. He was a national security advisor to both Kennedy and LBJ. He was the driving force behind the U.S. getting involved in the Vietnam War, which was basically done to benefit the CIA and the narcotics trafficking.
Yeah, because if I remember right, Kennedy didn't want anything to do with it.
Kennedy tried. It's one of the many reasons people think Kennedy was shot, is he was trying to stay out of foreign conflicts.
Well, because at the time, whenever Kennedy was alive, I believe the French was trying to do something with Vietnam, and then the French got utterly annihilated.
Yeah, they got routed. They left in an embarrassment. They left a mess, and we tried to clean it up. He's actually the son of the guy we named earlier, Robert Levitt. That's they're related. That's father son, just different last name.
Yeah.
He's also the brother of a bonesman named William Bundy, who was the State Department liaison for the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Are any of these guys related to the serial killer Bundy?
No, and I don't think they're related to Bundy Ranch either. But
there's a lot of Bundys. Anyway,
go ahead. Well, what about Al Bundy? The best Bundy ever.
Who's Al Bundy?
Married with children? Oh man.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a generation. That's difference in our generations.
Well, no, I've seen the show. I just forgot his name was Al Bundy.
All right, the next one you get here is George H.W. Bush, who was a bonesman in 1948. Needs no more explanation. Would go on to lead the CIA. So we're talking about secret societies tonight, and so I've made the case that the Scottish Rite Freemasons infiltrated the FBI, and I'm showing you how Skull and Bones has pretty much been the driving force behind the CIA. So it's hey, see you, Chris. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah.
So you can. This is our intelligence agencies, and this is who basically the House Republicans are about to investigate. And if they're not asking these questions, it's not a real investigation. So I don't know. Maybe I should give Jim Jordan a phone call because they've got a committee, church-style committee, to look into the intelligence agencies. I know we're at an hour. Can I just finish up the list? It'll only be a few minutes. Can we go a few minutes over?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
We just hit 1 hour, but I want to finish up the list just to tie it all together.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
William Buckley. That's the most shocking name on the list. And Doug couldn't believe it when I told him this one. Oh, that's funny, Stephanie.
Did you freeze or were you reading?
I was reading Stephanie.
Oh,
Sorry.
You look so still. I was like, did he just freeze?
My apologies. William Buckley is the founder of the American Conservative Movement. He's the founder of National Review and Firing Line. He was also the brother of a New York U.S. Senator, James Buckley, who was also a Bonesman. Another fun one, a guy by the name of Jonathan James Bush. Yes, he's related. He's the son of Prescott Bush. He was an investment banker, and he provides discreet banking in D.C., primarily works with foreign embassies. This is a money launderer.
Does he work for J.P. Morgan by any chance?
No, he was kind of an independent guy. He had his own thing. Next Bonesman. Oh, John Kerry. So this is both parties. 1966. George W. Bush, 1968. Guy by the name of Stephen Schwarzman, who is the CEO of the Blackstone Group, currently the second oldest landowner in the United States. Dana Milbank, he was a columnist for the Washington Post, who covered Bush and Obama exclusively. And then, of course, there's Austin Goolsbee, who's the chairman of Obama's Council of Economic Advisors. So what you have is secret societies putting their people in positions of power throughout the government and influential positions in business. And that is who runs the world right there. Or that is who runs the government, I should say.
Yeah.
These are the blue bloods, my friend. These are the people that think that they are above the law and better than the rest of us. Questions?
Is Stephanie talking about Ted Bundy in that comment?
Yeah. Oh, no, she's talking about Al Bundy from Married with Children, right?
Oh, I saw the show like a few times. I don't.
So if you were my age, you would have watched every episode of that. That was probably one of the best shows going.
How old are you?
I'll never say that on air. Come on, man. I'm a generation ahead of you, though.
That doesn't tell me nothing. All right, give me a hint. This is a fun game. Give me a hint.
I'm on the wrong side of 50. I admit that.
You look a lot younger than that.
I appreciate that. I'm glad you asked now. My ego's going to go do well. Yes, Stephanie, Doug and I will be on Sunday night to do more of our Federalist paper stuff. And I got some good stuff to bring to the table. We will not get to Federalist number 10 this week because that's one of the most important ones. That's my favorite. But it's fun stuff.
Oh, here's a fun fact. Speaking of the Federalists, the very first Federalist paper was on my birthday.
Interesting. I didn't know you were that old. That was like 245 years ago.
Yeah, no kidding. And the second Federalist paper was on my dad's birthday.
Ah. Now, when did
it was October 27th, 1787, and then the second one was October 31st of the same year.
How did you discover that? You were reading the Federalist Papers and just noticed the dates?
I don't remember. I think so, though. I think so. Because
So
I believe one was Hamilton, and the second one was James Madison, I want to say. Or I got that backwards.
I've got a fun birthday bit of trivia. You know, all of us have, you know, you look up famous people born on my birthday. Well, there's not a whole lot on mine. But I have a good buddy, Troy, and he and I had a lot in common. We met each other in New York training for my Wall Street firm and just had tons of things in common. We sat next to each other because our last names started with the same letter. We both were into weightlifting, basketball, all this stuff. And it turned out we had the exact same birthday. We also ended up being two of the most successful people out of our training class, so we've stayed in touch ever since. Well, I was said this was 2009. I've ruined his day. So I go, hey, Troy, you know how the only famous person born on August 4th that we've ever found was Roger Clemens? He's all, yeah. I go, we got a new one for you. He goes, oh, no, who's that? I go, oh, Barack Obama. And he goes, oh, man. I go, hey, but Troy, it's okay. The difference is you and I can prove it. So we've been telling that joke for 15 years now or something like that.
Isn't Barack Obama's real name like Barry something?
Barry Soetoro.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one.
Very African or Middle Eastern or wherever he's from.
Well, that's Filipino when he lived over in the Philippines or Indonesia, one of the two. That was his stepfather was a guy named Soetoro.
What about his husband, Michael?
You mean the next vice president of the United States? That's what some people are saying.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
That's funny.
I've seen video where Michelle's got something swinging.
Yeah, I don't trust any pictures these days. It's too easy to, what do they call it? CGI. Yeah, CGI is too easy to do. Look, I understand the photographic argument that Michelle Obama is Michael Obama, Michael Robinson originally. I get the area, and I've heard the stories of Bathhouse Barry. If it's true, I'm not going to be shocked. If it's not true, I'm not going to be shocked. To me, that's a nothing burger. I care about much more important things, about reasons I don't like either one of them for their policies and the people they associate with. Would it be scandalous? It would have been 10 years ago. Today, it'd probably be celebrated by half the people in this country.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, that shows you how far the world has changed in such a short amount of time. Barry Soetoro, Barack Obama, was anti-gay marriage for about the first 6 years of his presidency, and then he switched because the culture changed. So in about 2014, it all of a sudden be a gay marriage. Society did a rapid shift during his presidency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and he switched. He was openly anti-gay marriage. So interesting.
Yeah. Well, for everybody watching now and watching later, part 2 will be next week. We'll see who is here and who's not. That's a fun game. But anyway, let's go ahead and start wrapping it up.
Real quick, Stephanie, Elvis Presley did not die. He is living on an island with Bruce Lee and a few other people. Possibly Epstein was not invited to that island, but Elvis never died. Or at least that was the rumor at the time. You never heard that? You never heard that one, Andrew? That Elvis?
No.
There's a few people.
Heard he was abducted by aliens. I've heard that he was an operative for the CIA or something, and then I heard one where he died pooping on the toilet with some fried chicken.
Well, I think that's correct about the CIA. I think a lot of celebrities were operatives for FBI or CIA. That's how they gather intelligence on other important people. If you're a celebrity and you meet a lot of important people, you're a great source of information. And because these celebrities happen to party very hard, it's very easy for the intelligence agencies to get leverage over them. There is a long list of Hollywood celebrities that have worked for the CIA or the FBI or both. Yeah, none of that surprises me at all.
Well, there's some, I'm going to say this and then we need to wrap it up, but there's some interesting stuff lately that people have been posting about people in Hollywood where someone brings up, references without saying the actual name of the Illuminati. And then like the celebrity is like, shut up, like quit talking about it. And then there's this other stuff where it's like, shoot, what was it? I don't remember, but I don't know. It's interesting. I had something else I was going to say, but it left my mind.
Well, I was gonna ask you, Andrew. I know you're not feeling well and want to go, but if the audience here wanted to do an Ask Me Anything for about another 20 minutes, I could stick around.
You sure?
You guys want to give me a reaction in the chat? Do an AMA, Ask Me Anything, and I'll give you the best I can.
Well, you better put a caveat in that.
Well, anything that won't get this channel kicked off the air. How's that? What do you guys think? You guys want about 20 minutes of that? We'll wait a couple minutes for some reactions because we have slow typers, or we'll just decide that's not a popular reaction. All right. If we don't, I'll stay. You can go ahead and say good night, and I'll stick around and if they say anything, I'll stick around, and if not, I'll take us off the air in about a minute.
All right, cool. All right. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week, and thank you for tuning in.
All right, Andrew. I hope you feel better. And I'll shut this. I'll shut off the show in about a minute or two if it doesn't get in there interesting.
All right, cool. All right, see ya.
Good night, Andrew. See you next week. Well, Stephanie can't think of any questions. Brian B asked me how old I am. I don't answer that question publicly. Very few people know that, and I have no idea why I'm such a little bitch about that. I guess when I turned like 39, I was afraid of getting old, and now that I realize it, I've had more fun in my life at 40 and now turning 50. But let's see what else we have here in the chat. Born the day before the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Brian still thinks the bots are attacking him, but I see a lot of your comments, so I think you're okay. Chris took off. Bill's going to text me. All right, we've seen all those questions. So, well, if we don't get any, if we don't get any questions, well, yeah, yep, okay, fair enough. I just turned 55. There you go. You guys are going to be the first people to hear me tell the truth about my age in a long time. See, I'm honest. He did catch me on that. Do I think the GOP will be reformed? That is a great question. What I'd like to see happen is both the national political parties, blown to the ground, just burned, gone. We don't need national political parties. Will the GOP be reformed? It could be. A lot depends on how well we survive the next 2 years. But I think the Precinct Project has done a pretty decent job throughout the country. When Dan Schultz came out in 2020, or it was actually 2021 in January, came on the Steve Bannon show, and finally everyone heard about this Precinct Project. The idea was basically to get America First people into the local Republican Party precinct positions so they could determine the state precinct or the state GOP representatives who are now getting ready to vote for the GOP. And that was the way to take over the GOP and make it more America First. Well, when it came out, it was pretty clear that the effort was going to take at least 3 election cycles. And we just got through the first one. Now, if it's successful enough in the first 2 years that we get these, the 20 McCarthy holdouts got what they wanted in the House, and if Ronna McDaniel is unseated, I would say we're well on our way to the GOP being reformed to something much better than it has been. What you'll see happening is if it gets to be too America First and you get more Matt Gaetzes out there who will not take any, he's the only one who won't take any PAC money or corporate donors. If that happens, they're going to have a little bit of an issue with financing. But I think what will happen is you don't need campaign funds if you've got grassroots activists who do the door knocking for you. That is, you do not need this money. The advertising doesn't work. We've got the internet now. You can get the word out there without that. But you'll see the donor class desert that kind of a GOP. If the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who's the biggest lobbyist of the GOP, if they no longer have say in the party, they're going to take their business to the Democrats. So we'll be dealing with an even bigger dark money pool than we did before. But that may drive away more independent-minded Democrats. So we'll see what happens. But that's a good question. And I think there's too many current GOP congressmen and senators, the Mitch McConnells of the world, for us to expect any miracles. My biggest hope is that we actually have investigations where more dirty laundry and real investigations occur. I think those are happening. McCarthy seems very sincere. He followed through on kicking Adam Schiff and Swalwell and Ilhan Omar off their committees. So that's awesome stuff. So will I ever trust McCarthy? No, I'm in California. We know what McCarthy did in the midterms, what he's always done. We know how he holds power in the state GOP. He sabotaged all of the grassroots candidates. sent money to rhino candidates to beat them in primaries. When a grassroots candidate won the primary, McCarthy withheld funds to make their election even harder. He's been a deal maker his whole life. He's roommates with Frank Luntz. I don't trust the guy. Now, the cross side of that is MTG wrote a really long Twitter thread talking about how, she's been meeting with McCarthy and she thinks he's changed. She thinks he saw the light and has changed. So we'll see. My question is, did he stop the omnibus bill? Could he have? I don't know. Any other questions? Stephanie says they're charging us for the convention now, which some are complaining about. Yeah, hopefully they're not charging an arm and a leg, but yeah, you're right. He's a viper. Jim Jordan. We like Jim Jordan. Boy, he sure does give us some great sound bites, and he's the guy I wanted leading the House Judiciary. He's a pit bull. Yeah, 50's tough. I think even the Libertarian Party was charging for the convention. So, I think that was like $35 6 years ago, and I went to those. So I don't think that's unusual. And, they got to pay for the convention. Someone's got to pay for it. So I don't find that to be a major problem, charging for a convention. Who is Weiser, what have you? Weisner. Oh, okay. What else is going on? What we didn't get a chance to talk about was the special counsels. So at no point in history have we ever had two special counsels investigations going on a national level at the same time. And we currently have 3, which is pretty amazing because Durham's not done yet. You guys want me to talk a bit about Durham? Gotcha. Yeah, I know the name Weisner. Joe Biden gets caught with confidential information. Not 1, not 2, but 3 different locations. So is the Democratic Party forcing him out? A couple possibilities of what happened, why that went down. Because normally, if they were going to support Joe Biden, you would see them, basically if they discovered files in his Biden Penn Center, they would just burn them and we would have never heard about it. But somebody wanted him out. Dan Bongino speculated today that what he thinks would happen is some lawyer discovered the top secret files and sent an email to the White House, which made it part of the permanent record, which forced them to be accountable on it. All right, Bert Jean Ray, I'll go into Durham in a second. That's what forced the hand of the revelations. Now, they knew about this on November 2nd, that Biden was caught with top secret documents. And please remember that Donald Trump is accused of basically a procedural misconduct with his argument with the National Archives. Joe Biden has a criminal investigation against him. He had no ability to declassify, and he moved classified documents not once but at least twice to get it to the Penn Biden Center because, well, let's be honest, the Penn Biden Center wasn't open 2 years ago, and those records, he's had them for at least 6 years or 7 years now. 6. So basically they moved him once, and then the Penn Biden Center opened, they moved it again, and that was done under somebody's instructions. And there's a paper trail on these documents. When you sign out top secret SCIF stuff, there is a paper trail. There's a process. So Jim Jordan says they're going to investigate it, and I would imagine we actually get some real answers. So, in my opinion, unless Garland pulls one of the greatest, attempted obvious cover-ups in history, whereas they leak all the Trump information, and they don't leak any of the Biden information, and try to cover it up saying, oh, it's under, sorry, you can't see that information. It's under ongoing investigations, which is entirely possible. I think Biden's gone. And I think that's intentional. I think there are people, this is Democrat on Democrat crime. They've got someone else waiting in the wings. They think Kamala's obviously next in line. But who comes next? Who can they bring in that could actually get? So when the vice presidency is vacated, which would happen if Biden were to step down or be removed, Kamala becomes president, even though she's ineligible. Doug would agree. The vice presidency is vacated, and Kamala gets to nominate the next vice president. That vice president has to be confirmed by both houses of Congress by a majority. Which question did I miss, Tracy? I don't see it. You're gonna have to retype it. I did not see that one. I think YouTube has a real big issue with his chat. I think questions disappear all the time. I've been noticing it for several months in different shows. So if something disappears, it's not my fault. I am not ghosting anyone. Anyways, what candidate could they possibly put forth that a Republican majority House would actually approve? And I can't think of one. It would be, they're not going to bring in a Gavin Newsom and lose the governorship of California. And Gavin's not going to take that because he's in a more powerful position. Are they going to bring in Michelle Obama? I don't know. Would she be able to pass, the 218 vote threshold in the House? I don't think so. So historically, you've had the vice presidency vacated for periods of time, over 3 months. It's either 9 or 10 times. And the longest was when Andrew Johnson became president after Lincoln was shot, because that was 1865. He had 3 years to go as a president. And Andrew Johnson was a Democrat and Lincoln was a Republican. And Republicans were dominant powers in the House and the Senate. And now Hakeem Jeffries is not giving up his position. They may be positioning him for a presidential run. People are speculating. I think the guy's, I think he's a lightweight intellectually. I don't think he could survive a campaign. He'd be exposed. But they're definitely talking about that. But where it gets interesting is what happens if the vice presidency stays vacant for 3 years because they can't give the Republicans anybody who they'll accept. Well, the world doesn't really come to an end because the vice president doesn't have any real responsibilities. Oh, going back to Andrew Johnson. So he's a Democrat. Lincoln, after the Civil War ended, had Andrew Johnson become his vice president or candidate because he wanted to make a show of unity. And, the South was more Democratic, and that was a kind of a throwing them a bone. Well, then Lincoln gets shot. Johnson becomes president. He vetoes more bills than any president in history. He was the first president ever impeached and only survived by one vote in the Senate. He missed by one more vote, and he would have been the only president ever impeached and removed. But he couldn't get a vice president through that the Republicans would accept. So he spent the entire length of his presidency without a VP. And that may happen here. Now, what happens if that occurs and the Kamala lawsuit goes through? Well, you just got President Kevin McCarthy. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing, but it's probably better than what we have. Never saw that one coming. Bert Jean Ray wants to talk about Durham. Who becomes Speaker of the House if McCarthy became president? Matt Gaetz. I'd like to see that. Durham is not done, or not officially at least. We just got a lot more information in the Twitter files, and a couple other revelations have come out that are, if Durham doesn't have that info already, I'd be surprised, but he's got some more directions to go for subpoenaing some more efforts. Remember, he was tasked with discovering, looking into the origins of the Russia collusion. Well, it was just revealed again and again, even worse than we already knew, that the Russia hoax was always a hoax. They knew it. When they started running around saying Russia bots, for all these different memos, when Devin Nunes exposed all this stuff. Patriots.win guest, welcome. Glad you could make it. That's my main. If you guys don't know Patriots.win, that's the website I probably spend most of my time on. There's a lot of pretty sharp people there. I learned an awful lot from some other smart people on that site, and that's probably where I get a good chunk of my information. So check out Patriots.win. I'm there under this name, Warhamster, and I think it's the best community on the entire internet. So I'm glad my small little advertisement brought someone here. Thanks for coming. You want to tell me what name you're in under there? Is it the same name? Anyways, we're at Durham. Talking about basically they were saying all of the stuff that Devin Nunes is putting out was Russian bots, even though Twitter is telling them no, it's not. So now you got Adam Schiff lying again. You've got Dick Blumenthal, lying about this stuff, even though he's being told these are not Russian bots. The left can't give us Russia ever again. I mean, that's it. That story is over. Awesome. So the Russia story is now finally done. We've got so much information. If they bring it up on Twitter, we just destroy them. And it's been a fun 48 hours doing that. And, you know, you guys have probably all heard me say I don't trust Elon Musk for his transhumanist stuff, etc. Tell you what he's done with Twitter has been awesome. Actually having public discourse without censorship, and Twitter Spaces has been amazing. In the COVID conversations, you've had people like Dr. Eugene Gu, who I think is a piece of shit, because what he did for censoring everybody over, during the lockdowns and all during COVID. He now gets on a Twitter Spaces with someone like a Robert Malone and actually has to, or Stephen Kirsch, who these people are asking the right question to say, look, you guys did this policy even though the information said the opposite, and these lockdown clowns, they can't answer for it. And we're having open and polite dialogue, which is good for the country. So, look, I'm never going to be an Elon Musk fanboy, but what he's done so far has been pretty phenomenal. And I was a lot more skeptical 2 months ago, but the results I'm seeing, especially with Twitter files, man, that's been one of the best things I've ever seen. All right, so a couple things with Durham. Either he's done with his investigation, no more prosecutions, or he isn't. If there's more prosecutions, well, get the popcorn out, because the next names on the list are people who work for the FBI. There's also James Baker, who's in all kinds of hot water and will be soon. There's more of his files are coming out. Matt Taibbi hinted at that. If he is done with his investigations, he gets to write his report. The report goes to Merrick Garland. Garland can censor or block out parts of the report. Durham has one recourse. He then reports. He gets to report, give his final report. I don't think this is public, but he gives his report to the House Judiciary Committee. So his last trial was 4 months ago, and he could have had his report done before January 3rd, but he didn't. And I suspect that if he's done, he may have waited till we had the Republicans in position of being in charge of the House Judiciary, so the truth actually gets out there. So we're not done with Durham. There's a lot more stuff that could come. The problem, so we don't get any hopium going here, is let's say all these House investigations reveal all kinds of shenanigans that we all think actually happened, both with Russia and all that stuff. What can they do besides reveal it? They don't have the power to prosecute. They can't name a special counsel. The DOJ is not going to prosecute their own. Forget the fact that they named a special counsel for Biden, and forget what everyone's saying that this guy has a reputation. This guy, what is his last name? He worked for Rod Rosenstein. He worked for Christopher Wray. This is not a guy who is on our side. He may have to take down Biden, but that may be a sacrificial lamb. You're not going to get Merrick Garland to investigate these major crimes. So who's got the power and the willingness to do so? It requires something that's never happened before, some kind of a tribunal. We can't count on the military at this point, but could the states convene a tribunal? Could enough states agree to do an Article 5 convention to create something like that? What is our recourse? I don't see a direct path to justice at this point, unless it's Durham going to trial, which would be in D.C. more than likely, which we already know the results of. We've seen that even with truth that's so glaring that anybody with common sense can draw the conclusions that these people are guilty. These people that follow this cult religion of woke leftism, they will still not convict, because to them, the ends justify the means. They have no sacred honor. And so we're in unprecedented territory here. The Constitution's got a lot of remedies, but I don't think they ever foresaw anything quite this bad. My solution has always been an Article 5 convention to fix this stuff. It's the best tool. It was the only tool the founding fathers gave us to rein in an out-of-control federal government. And yet in 240 plus years, we've never used it once. Every time we had something that was so obvious that an amendment was going to happen, Congress would propose the amendment so we could not convene in a convention of states. That's how scared the federal government is of the states reasserting their own rights. Let's see. Any other questions here? Hang on. So agreement. Come on, there's more topics. Hakeem Jeffries. One of the funniest things I saw was, gosh, help me out here. Who's the black congressman from South Carolina, the Johnson? He was planting conspiracy theories that the Biden stuff was planted by Trump. Yeah, good luck with that. How would Republicans have gotten access to Biden's house, the Biden Penn Center, and one other location to plant documents that they wouldn't have had access to in the first place because it was considered top secret? How would they have gotten into a SCIF without there being a record? And this is the same Johnson. God, I wonder if it's worth playing. This is so funny. Let's see if I can pull it up really fast. I don't know if you guys remember this one. Give me 1 second. Okay, I got it. This is worth it. Hank Johnson. It's a 2-minute thing.
Do you love Gantt charts? Here's how easily you can build one in quickly. Let's map out the tasks for your Gantt chart in this list. Perfect. Now, let's add a Gantt view.
Anderson Cooper,
dumbest man in
AC360,
Congress.
CNN weeknights 10 Eastern.
A lot of odd things happen in Planet Washington. I actually thought this was kind of an April Fool's joke when I saw it today, but it's not. It took place last week in a House
Sorry to show Anderson Cooper to you. It was the first link that came up on YouTube. My apologies.
Armed Services Committee hearing discussing a military buildup on the island of Guam. Here's Georgia Congressman Hank Johnson. Listen.
This is a island that at its widest level is 12 miles from shore to shore, and at its smallest level or smallest location, it's 7 miles between one shore and the other. Is that correct?
I don't have the exact dimensions, but to your point, sir, I think Guam is a small island.
Very small island, and about 24 miles, if I recall, long. So 24 miles long, about 7 miles wide at the least widest place on the island, and about 12 miles wide on the widest part of the island. And I don't know how many square miles that is. Do you happen to know?
I don't have that figure with me, sir. I can certainly supply it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, my fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
We don't anticipate that.
Sorry, I love that reaction. Guam's gonna tip over. That was up there with was it Danny Glover when they had the Haiti earthquake? He gets on it, jumped in front of a camera, and he goes, well, "This is why we got to stop global warming." I mean, you can't make up stuff this stupid. He's really nobody has ever insinuated that global warming, the atmosphere, can impact an earthquake. But Danny Glover, anyways, Guam tipping over is one of the funniest things I think I have ever seen. And that man's been in Congress for 20 years. He's never going to lose a race. So I saw a couple of Stephanie commented about patriots being scared of an Article 5 convention. Yeah, I know. That's been there's two different groups that are afraid of that, that are trying to keep an Article 5 convention for. One is, first of all, George Soros spends millions of dollars every year to scare people away from an Article 5 convention. Says, oh, you got to worry about a runaway convention. And to which I answer, I want a runaway convention. You know, that's how we got the Constitution. That was the runaway convention. If things are broken, let's fix them. If you think we live in a country where 3/4 of the states would ratify something that's bad for us, then the country's already done. So that's a terrible argument. All it takes is 13 states to block anything bad. And we definitely have 13 sensible states. So if we come up with reasonable ideas, maybe we can get some purple states to agree to make some changes in Article 5 convention. The other group is who's really notorious about not liking the Article 5 convention is the Thomas Birch Society, John Birch Society, sorry. And I like the John Birch people. We've talked about this in the show. Doug and I agree on this one. Okay, explain Article 5. Basically, if 2/3 of the states agree, Congress must allow us to convene a convention of states where we can amend the Constitution. Anything that comes out of that convention then goes out to the states for ratification, and then 3/4 of the states have to agree to any new amendment. It's very difficult to get 3/4 of the states to come up with a bad idea, but it is not impossible because they gave us the 16th and 17th Amendments in 1913. And that only happened because, well, the people who wanted a central bank and a centralized government, the kind of people we're talking about, they owned all the newspapers. And that's what they basically did is they fooled the people with media propaganda. And they said, look, the state legislatures have been appointing their own senators, since the Constitution was signed, but these state legislatures are so corrupt, it's making DC corrupt. We need to move the vote so you, the people, elect the senators, because the people can't be fooled, apparently. That was sarcasm. And that's how they fooled us. They said, oh, we'll just centralize the corruption instead of decentralize it. Hey, if it was me and I wanted to bribe politicians to do things I wanted, I'd rather one-stop shop in D.C. than have to go to 50 different state legislatures. Decentralize everything is the answer. Could we get 2/3 of the states? That's a really good question. If you believe in the Convention of States Action, which is a very big group with about 5 or 6 million people, we're up to like 19 states. If you believe what Doug and some friends think, we already have 49 states that who have approved an Article 5 convention, because what happens is the state legislature votes on a movement to convene a state legislature for whatever reason. These things do not expire. And over the course of the last 200 years, 49 states have active applications for Article 5 convention. If we had an honest Congress, they don't have a choice, because it says Article 5 says they shall. Let me read it to you. I got it right here. Hang on. Article 5 is a short one. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments. Blah, blah, blah. It says Congress in either case shall be valid to intents and purposes. Part of this Constitution ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the states, several states, as one or, okay, there it is. If 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments. So Congress doesn't have a choice if we get 2/3 of the states. It should have happened already. We just can't hold Congress to the carpet. How do the states vote? Well, it's not really written how we decide who our representatives are in the Article 5, but I believe it can't be a sitting congressperson, no sitting politician. So it would come from we the people, the delegates. The only precedent we have for the rules on this is Philadelphia Convention in 1787. So could Doug and I be California's representatives? Maybe, if we held it to a popular vote. It's possible. I would love to be there. It'd be my whole life's dream to be there, because I guarantee no bullshit would be passed. I'd be handing out pocket constitutions the whole time. Okay, that's it on Article 5. There's another question I wanted to get to. What do I think about Russia and Ukraine? If you go to my channel on Rumble under war_hamster, you'll I've done some videos on this, but I'll give you a quick synopsis. There's a reason Ukraine is the most corrupt country in the Northern Hemisphere. Yeah, I'll do a good 5 minutes on this one. It's worth it, and then we'll wrap up. The Ukraine-Russia conflict goes back to 2003 in the Orange Revolution, where a guy by the name of Yanukovych was president, won the election, and America didn't like that. And we got the whole world to say, hey, the elections were unfair. So they had to run a new election, and somehow Yanukovych lost. So a America-friendly prime minister or president was put in place in the Ukraine, and it continued its corruption. And America continued to have its military bases and its biolabs and money laundering. The most powerful of the oligarchs in the Ukraine was a guy by the name of Ihor Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky had several businesses. He used to be the owner of a company called Burisma. You may have heard of that one. That's the oil and gas company that Hunter Biden worked for. Yeah, that's Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky gets into, fast forward, 2012 election, Yanukovych wins, and he's in negotiations. Sorry, go back 2 years. When Obama got elected and Hillary was Secretary of State, they had this thing called the Russian Reset, where we were going to repair our relations with Russia. Big headline news. It's one of his main focus points. He ran on that. And that was kind of happening. They even did a joint venture to do the Russian Silicon Valley called Skolkovo. And Skolkovo was going fine until in 2012, I think it was. Department of Defense issued a release, said, look, we've got all these American companies giving away huge intellectual property to Russian companies. This has to stop. It's a national security threat. Now, whether that was legitimate, it's true. These 20 companies somehow were all major donors to the Clinton Foundation. Don't know how that worked. Little pay-to-play going on there. So things started to so Skolkovo gets canceled midstream, and the icy relations started in 2013 when I'm going to forget the name of the president at the time of Ukraine, but he was Yanukovych. Yeah, Yanukovych. He's from the eastern part, so he's a Russian speaker natively. He's in negotiations with the European Union on EU membership and possibly even NATO. Well, that's a no-no. In 1991, when the USSR broke up, our Secretary of State James Baker promised the Russians not 1 inch closer will NATO go towards Russia's borders. And between 1991 and 2013, 13 Eastern European countries joined NATO. And Ukraine was the next domino to fall, which basically means we could have nukes right on, 5-minute flight from Moscow. And that's not okay. That's very aggressive. This is basically the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's the equivalent of putting nukes in Cuba. We shouldn't have been doing that. That's bad foreign policy. So Yanukovych is getting really close to signing these deals and gets in negotiations with Vladimir Putin. And at the last minute, he pulls out of the EU negotiations and strengthens his ties with trade with Russia. Remember, Ukraine is about 50-50 between Ukrainian speakers and Russian speakers. So it's a mismatched country to start with. And it is definitely an east-west divide. And the interesting part is most of the agricultural and production and industrial production is on the Russian side of things. So what's left in Ukraine, if they were to split in half, is pretty poor, which is not good for money laundering. So 2014, the Maidan Revolution happens, which is basically the U.S.-led coup, color revolution, ousts Yanukovych and puts in Poroshenko. We know it's a U.S.-led coup because we have a 2-minute audio tape of Victoria Nuland, the number 2 in our State Department, talking with our Ukrainian ambassador, Jeffrey Pyatt, and they're basically, it's P-Y-A-T-T, maybe it's Pyatt, basically deciding which of these crooked Ukrainian people they're going to put into power, which ended up being Poroshenko. And you don't do that before a coup happens unless you're committing the coup. And you can pull up, you can just Google it right now, or I'm sorry, don't use Google. Use a search engine and look up Victoria Nuland call with Jeffrey Pyatt. It's out there. And they're negotiating, toppling a government. And we do it just like that. Our CIA's done it like 83 times in the last 60 or 70 years. It's stuff we were talking about earlier. So fast forward, Poroshenko gets put into place. America's, we're not all corrupt, and we're trying to look good on the international stage. And we want Ukraine to, they've got a bad reputation for a reason. So they got to get this anti-corruption department going and investigations. And so we've given millions and millions and billions, I should say, in aid to Ukraine over the years. And the way it goes through USAID. And what happens is we'll make a loan or we'll have the World Bank give a loan, or the IMF, and it gets deposited in the Ukrainian bank, and the Ukrainian bank is supposed to give loans to Ukrainian corporations. That's the way the U.S. aid is supposed to work. Well, in the case of the Ukraine, the big bank was called Privatbank, and like 95% of the money that we gave, and this is billions of dollars, flowed through Privatbank, which was owned by a guy by the name of Ihor Kolomoisky. And Kolomoisky was giving all the loans out to companies and shell companies owned by Ihor Kolomoisky. And the money would then get funneled off into Cyprus, and then it would get laundered into the United States. And right now, Ihor Kolomoisky, who is not allowed to set foot in the United States because he's a bad actor, owns about 40 to 50% of the skyline in Cleveland, Ohio, and about 40% of the skyline in Louisville, Kentucky. It's all documented fact. This is how deep the corruption goes. Kolomoisky's bank gets nationalized in 2017 by Poroshenko because of U.S. pressure. Kolomoisky's not happy about this. Kolomoisky runs the second biggest Jewish organization in Europe, and they are rivals with the Israeli-led Jewish groups. So there's some bad blood there. Kolomoisky's not allowed to set foot in Russia. He hates Putin. Putin hates him. So there's some bad blood there. One thing Kolomoisky also owns is like the 9 biggest television stations in the Ukraine. So he decides the only way to get his bank back is to put a president that's going to be his puppet. And working for him is an actor who's playing the role of a president, a guy by the name of Zelensky. Well, with Kolomoisky owning all the television stations, giving free advertisement, and Zelensky being very popular as an actor, Zelensky wins the election. So we fast forward to 21 is the next important thing that happens. Kolomoisky doesn't have Privatbank back yet at this point, but he's working on it. Zelensky and all the Ukrainian people, since Poroshenko, they are U.S. puppets. They're not going to make a move unless the State Department agrees to it, because that's where all their money's coming from. In 21, Zelensky makes an open statement that he wants to retake Crimea, which Crimea is a very, very pro-Russian, very anti-Ukraine. The Crimeans voted on a referendum in 2014 during the Maidan Revolution. Like 90% of the people voted to remain part of the Russian Federation. They've got a little bit of a land bridge problem, but the Crimeans are happy. Well, Ukraine wants Crimea back because it's a nice piece of land. When Zelensky openly says that they're planning on taking back Crimea and starts moving about 90,000 troops that direction, that's a bit of a red flag. That means something's about to happen. We fast forward to February of 2022. So let's go to January 22. The head of the International Atomic Energy Commission came out and actually told us that Ukrainian nuclear plants had enough fissile nuclear material to create several nuclear bombs. Remember when Russia invaded? The first thing they did was to seize the nuclear plants. Yeah, that was in play. That could have been a reason for the invasion, one of many. We also know about the biolabs, which could have been another reason for the invasion because they seized those. But I think the real reason was the troop movements, first towards Crimea, but then in February of 2022, there's I forget the name of the independent watchdog, but they keep track. Okay, so for the last 8 years, these Nazi battalions, paramilitary organizations have been waging war against the eastern part of the United States. It was Ukrainians versus Russia. They're bombing mortar shells on a daily basis going back for 8 years. The war started in 2014, and Russia did not invade. They lent some troops because these are ethnic Russians, the territory that's always been Russian, and they're very sympathetic, but they don't want to start World War III. So in early February, this group tracks how many explosions are happening in the Donbass region, this independent third-party group. And they were averaging 10 to 20 a day, and which is a lot. I have 0 mortar shells in my neighborhood, so 10 to 20 seems like a bit. But leading up into February, like on the 17th of February, 2022, the number of these explosions went up to like 50 a day, then 100 a day, then 800 a day, then got into thousands a day. And this was during a 1 week period. So they're obviously escalating. With satellite technology, Putin could tell that Zelensky had been moving troops north, and that's what triggered the invasion. February 17th is also the day that Biden got something right for the first time ever. because he'd been wrong about everything. He actually said, I think Russia's going to invade Ukraine. And that's why I'm on air saying that's not going to happen. And here's why. And I was dead wrong. But when Biden's right and I'm wrong, something's up. Seriously, it's probably the first time it ever happened. Anyway, so the Americans basically Ukrainians were planning on a full-scale military assault on the Donbass region. That was going to happen. So Russia invades. And of course, everyone knows the news ever since. We've given billions of dollars. Ukraine keeps throwing their own people into the meat grinder. Russia's being very cautious, and they've got artillery superiority. They got air superiority. They've got a big troop buildup coming right now. Apparently they're waiting on the ground to get hard enough in the winter. It's been a very warm winter, but you can expect a full-scale invasion to happen any day now. There could have been peace a number of times. America doesn't want Zelensky to go to the negotiating table. I think the big takeaway from this is I was convinced last year that the Great Reset, the New World Order, failed when Russia invaded Ukraine. It gave us basically when we put sanctions on Russia, they started trading their oil and grains in rubles instead. They got off the dollar system, and it showed the rest of the world that could be done. And now you've got 50 to 60% of the planet that doesn't want to be part of the one world order. And you can't have a Great Reset or one world government when half the world doesn't want to be part of it. And you can't have a one world currency, which is what they need, when you have multi-currencies. If you take a step back, Russia's foreign policy for the last 20-something years has been ruled by what's called the Primakov Doctrine. And that's worth looking up and reading. Primakov is a very bright guy. Putin was a disciple of his, and so is Lavrov, the brilliant foreign secretary of Russia. And the number one doctrine is they want to get away from the monopolar world, what they call the Anglo-American transatlantic rules-based order that has ruled the world since World War II. And they've done it through monetary terrorism and CIA soft coups. That's basically what the real history is. Well, that's ended. The globalists are still going to try to do their Great Reset. We see the Biden administration still trying to do it every single day. They're trying to take away our gas-fired stoves. One of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen is watching a bunch of leftists who knew nothing about stoves a week ago are all of a sudden experts. That cracks me up. Stovegate is going to go down in history as one of the biggest examples of groupthink in history, because nobody knew anything. There was a problem with gas stoves a week ago. So what happens? How do we, how does this end? Well, I think Russia has a major offensive push. We force them to the negotiating table. Russia gets the territories they wanted. We get a forced peace. Zelensky probably retires to his mansion in Florida. How does an ex-actor, president of a poor country, have a net worth of over $600 million, according to the Pandora Papers? Yeah, that's documented fact. The money laundering is ridiculous. And of course, you got Republicans and Democrats just voted again to give them more money. Good old GOP there to save the day. Lindsey Graham beating the war drums, trying to talk about World War III. Guy's ridiculous. Definitely one of my least favorite politicians in history. So we end up with a world where you have several reserve currencies, and that's okay. The American dollar will not be as strong as it once was. We've been living on borrowed time with the dollar hegemony. Anyways, the Primakov Doctrine, which I was trying to get to, their number one goal, the first pillar of their entire foreign policy doctrine, which they've been following, they told us what they're going to do, is to get away from the monopolar one world currency. And they have done that. The one world government's over. Anybody who thinks Putin's part of the World Economic Forum, maybe there's a picture with him there. I used to think it. I gave a presentation. It's on my channel where I said that's a possibility. And then about 3 weeks later, I gave another presentation that said, no, I've changed my mind. I've got new information. And you're allowed to be wrong if you're willing to change your mind when the information changes. And so I don't feel bad about that. There was a possibility that he was World Economic Forum. And now I think what you're going to find is a world that's divided into different regions with different currencies. You're going to find the West at a disadvantage because we've spent the last few decades going on expensive and unreliable green energy, while the East is going to be using cheap fossil fuels. China's got a chance to implode. I talked about Matthew Ehret earlier. He totally disagrees with me on this. He thinks China's doing all kinds of great things. I think they have a demographic time bomb. I think they have a debt problem. I can only rely on the information that's available to me. He says I'm getting Western propaganda. I don't know the truth. I do know that the one-child policy means China's population is going to go down by about 500 million in the next couple of decades, and that's pretty hard to support a growing age of retired people when you have fewer workers. I think the world could get interesting. This could end up being a good thing. This is the less violent solution to the current global problems. I don't know. Did I cover that okay? Is there anything I missed? So let me read some of the chat, and if there's anything good, I'll address it, and if not, I will say goodnight. Stephanie doesn't trust machines, nor should you. Somebody one of the Arizona people, who's a Democrat on Twitter, was arguing for a block. How do you make elections better? He goes, blockchain. I go, does that include voter rolls? He goes, registration is different than voting. And I just threw my hands up. I go, how is registration different than voting? If you can't trust the people if you don't know the people who are voting are eligible, the manner of voting doesn't matter whatsoever. And he hasn't answered, but I think I finally shut that guy up. No, I don't want machine voting whatsoever. The think tanks should fire up the fear machine and pound Article 5 into the ground. No, they'll try to. Stephanie asked, how would the states vote? It's a popular vote or a delegate. Okay, so amendments have been done two different ways. It can either be done by state legislature votes or popular vote. And that really, the convention, Congress has decided on all the other amendments, one or the other, and to calculate which is the most likely to pass. The convention itself will, if they put an amendment out to the states, the convention will determine whether it's the states vote, the legislature's voting, or the people voting, whether it's popular vote. So it could be either or. Did I miss anything? Nope. I think a lot of Hank Johnson comments, and all right, that's probably about all I got. Well, I appreciate you guys all sticking around and listening to my monologue. It's very good practice for me. It's the first time I've done anything like this unprepared. Fortunately, you guys asked good questions about things I actually knew something about. So I appreciate that. Had you asked me, I'm not going to pretend to know things I don't know, because that's, you lose credibility that way. But on that note, I will say goodnight, everybody, and have yourselves a great weekend. I hope you can all tune in 5 o'clock on Patriot Soapbox to watch me and Doug and Alan Myers talk about the Federalist Papers. And with that, good night all. I'm going to end the broadcast. Thanks, everyone.